Welcome to the Truetone Lounge. I'm your host, Zach Childs, and today we're talking with Russ Pahl. Russ Pahl has an amazingly long and varied career, everything from being a sideman with major artists like Don Williams, or being in a signed band like Great Plains in the early 90s, work playing on demos, touring work, session work. He's played with everyone and their dog. It's not many people can go out and play on Austin City Limits, with Dan Auerbach, and then play pedal steel guitar with Vince Gill for 3 years, and just all these different things. He's also had a career as a solo artist. This is his album.
Yeah, just see if you can find one of those.
Not what I expected. So that Russ actually did as just as a gift to his friends. So so this is kind of a collector's item. All right, so let's get started. Let's talk. Let's just go back to the beginning and what was your initial kind of impetus to get into the guitar in the first place?
Well, I have two older sisters, and this was back in probably 1963. They were into folk music. That was they called the big folk scare of the early 60s. Yeah. And Peter, Paul and Mary, Theodore Piquel, Pete Seeger, all that. They were way into that. And my sister Nancy had a Silvertone, one of the the $10 model guitars, and I picked it up and learned like an E and an A chord, and we were in 4-H, so we did a trio of at the Share the Fun Festival of If I Had a Hammer. And I just remembered this the other day is I didn't know how to play the song, but what I did was at the beginning of the song I went E, E, A, and then we sang the song a cappella because I didn't know how to play along with singing. But I played the introduction on the guitar. Well, this was in 63. Well, I believe it was in 64. I hope I have the year right, when the Beatles were in Ed Sullivan.
Right.
And I saw that, and already being a guitar player, it was basically like a brick in the forehead to me. It was, the decision was made that night, that Sunday night. The next day I came home from school, took my sister's guitar down into my dad's workshop and glued knobs on it. And I think I even might have taken a hacksaw and made a cutout on it, just because I didn't know that an electric guitar had an amplifier and all that. I just knew that it had knobs on it.
So you tried to add a cutaway and knobs to an acoustic guitar?
I was already hot rodding guitars, day two there. So. Yeah. But and that was it. It's pretty simple. And I mean, there's a number of people that I was just at the right age that whole thing was just, it was the big boom.
First paid gig?
First paid gig was probably my same sister who I stole the guitar from got me in with a band at our high school. They were all about 4 years older than me, but she said my little brother plays guitar. So I went to the rehearsal, and then they ended up making me the lead player. And we played somebody's party, I remember. Like a Saturday night, and we probably made $5 a piece. But we were playing songs by Paul Revere and the Raiders and the Animals, all the garage rock stuff. Yeah.
At what point do you get to Nashville?
Much later, like 1984, 85.
And so what were you doing in that time before Nashville?
Well, I was playing. I'm from Minneapolis, a suburb of Minneapolis, and I was playing in this band, the Unlimited Five, with the guys, older guys. And then when I was about 14, I got a phone call from this guy. He said, we have a country band, and our cousin is off on a drunk somewhere, and he's not playing guitar with us tonight. Can you come and play guitar with us? I said, if you can come and pick me up, I don't drive. So I went and played with them, and I got the gig. And so for a couple of years, I played with this band called the Rhythm Rascals, and we played in little bars and taverns all around the western end of Minneapolis.
And you also picked up the pedal steel. How did that come about?
Well, playing with that band, we had a thing every Sunday night. We played at a ballroom about 80 miles west of Minneapolis. And the guy who owned the ballroom had a hookup with some booking agent, so every Sunday night, some Nashville act would be coming through. Tammy Wynette, Ernest Tubb, Hank Williams Jr. before the accident and all that. Well, we would do an opening set for whoever, and then they'd play a show, then we'd do another little set, and then they'd do a second show. We were playing one night, and Wynn Stewart was there from California, and he had this guy playing this thing, and it was Ralph Mooney.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, we played our set, and Ralph came over to me, and he said, "Kid, you're playing the wrong instrument." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, you're over there playing that Gretsch with all them rubber band strings, bending strings all over the place." He said, "This thing will bend the strings for you." And I said, "Wow, well, will you show me?" And he said, "Sure." So afterwards, after we got done that night, he sat me down and showed me just the basic EA change on his old Fender pedal steel, and I picked that up. And so steel guitar kind of found me.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what it was.
That's pretty incredible, because Wynn Stewart was such a big part of that, the birth of the whole Bakersfield scene.
Yeah.
And all those guys played in his band, even
Right.
Merle and Roy Nichols and all these
yeah,
cats.
yeah.
And so getting to see Wynn with
Ralph Mooney,
with Ralph Mooney
who
is
else?
amazing.
I didn't even know who else was with him. It was probably an all-star cast. I
Yeah.
didn't know.
Wow.
But the next day, the bass player who had a driver's license, we skipped out of class, and I heard there was a used pedal steel at a pawn shop in North Minneapolis, kind of in the bad side of town. So we went down there, and I bought a homemade little 10-string pedal steel guitar for probably $120 or something. And that was Monday, and Friday I was playing it on the gig. I mean, very simple stuff, but my system is wired for that. I like my dad was a machinist, so I've got a bit of a mechanical thing inside me.
Right.
So the idea of playing with your hands and then being able to do mechanical moves in the change, that's very natural to me. So,
because that's really the impediment for a lot of guitar players that try to pick up the steel.
Yeah.
Is the fact that you have these pedals that are changing the pitches on multiple strings at a time.
Right.
And it's like all of a sudden, oh, I've got a different tuning now. All of a sudden, it's like I'm shifting tuning almost.
Well, and I think in a lot of ways they're just overthinking it. Where I clearly, from the moment he showed me that first pedal change, I could clearly see it in my mind how that worked. And I can't play lap steel. Everybody, people are always showing me their lap steels, like, isn't this cool? And I go, to me, it's like a dog looking at a TV. I just don't, they're kind of cool looking old instruments, but they don't appeal to me at all because they don't have the mechanical change.
Right.
So
take us to how did you what inspired you to move to Nashville?
I lived in Minneapolis for many years, played clubs all through I got out of high school around 72 and immediately was getting into club bands and playing 6 and 7 nights a week. There was so much work up there in the early 70s. The nightclubs were all over. They were paying well. There was country. I was playing country bands, disco bands, hard rock bands, all kinds of bands. And I was working all the time. And I did that till the mid-'80s. And then I realized I need to get out of this town because I'm sort of a big frog in a small pond. And I saw that you could become relatively complacent there and probably get by. And I thought, well, I'll probably drink myself to death if I stay here. So I needed to get out of the bars. So I came to Nashville. I figured I would like to play on records. I always read the back of the albums, and I knew more who played on the records than most of the guys did that played on them.
Right.
I was just one of those geeks. So came in about 84.
Was Michael Johnson, was that one of the first major gigs you had?
Yeah, that was, when I first came, a friend of mine, Danny Parks, had been playing with Dickie Betts, and he hooked me up with Dickie. Dickie was living in Nashville at the time, and I went and played through my friend Danny. I went and overdubbed on this country song. Well, It's Too Late to Go Home Early was the name of the song. And I played steel on it, and a week later his management called and said, Dickie's putting a band together to go out and do some playing. Do you want to come along? So that was my first ever time on a bus.
Was with Dickie Betts.
Yeah. So for better part of a year, I played out with Dickie Betts, and that band had John Yudkin on fiddle and Johnny Neal on keyboards. It was a really good band, and we had all the parts, all the Allman parts worked out in three-part harmony with Dickie and the fiddle and the piano and the steel. So
wow.
So that was pretty cool. That was my first sort of big time gig.
And so does Michael Johnson come after that?
Yeah, we had a group of few of us that were starting to do demos together, demo recordings together, and Brent Mayer, Michael's producer and the Judd's producer, heard one of our demos, and he started hiring us to do publishing demos for him. And then Michael Johnson, who he was producing, heard us, and he was going to do a whole summer of opening for Alabama and Restless Heart. So we went out and toured with him, with a whole 5-piece band with drums and bass. And Michael had a couple hit records at the time.
Like Bluer Than Blue.
Yeah. Right. And then we stripped it down to a trio with just me on acoustic guitar and Jack Sunderwood on bass and Michael. And we had this trio, which was really cool, and was a vocal trio. We did we did a bunch of television. We did Austin City Limits and all that with Michael. And that was great. That's one of the best bands I've ever been in.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I've heard a number of people talk, really fondly about playing in simple trios like that.
Trios, no, the power of three is I mean, I saw Jimi Hendrix in Minneapolis. I didn't get to see Cream, but I've always loved the concept of the trio. And it's funny because actually, when you first, especially if you downsize from a bigger band, you think, well, I've got to play more to compensate. And it's actually, you play less. You just play with broader strokes. Each player plays less with broader strokes, and you get this big sound. So no, trios are amazing.
And at what point did Don Williams come into the picture?
With Michael Johnson, we did a tour of Western Canada, opening for Don. And I already knew Dave Pomeroy was playing bass, and Steve Turner was playing drums. And so the first day up in Winnipeg at Soundcheck, I was hanging out with those guys, and I met Garth Fundus that day, and I met Billy Sanford that day, who was playing lead guitar. I ended up marrying Billy's daughter and getting very close with all those people. And the next season, Garth Fundus called me and asked if I'd be interested in playing with Don. So that was my dream gig, and that was such a great band because we played so soft. I learned how to play at session volume with that band, just how to play whisper soft, let the PA do the work. And it was like playing with a little chamber orchestra. So I played with Don, I think 3 years.
Wow.
And it was such a great gig. And I played, I sang a lot of harmony. I played acoustic rhythm, played steel. There was times when Pomeroy, something happened, so I played bass with him a couple nights. I just kind of was the pinch hitter for the Don Williams band for a couple years.
Yeah, I found last night, in fact, I found a clip of you and Don Williams and Pomeroy just playing as a trio.
Right, yeah.
It was great.
So, no, Don was great.
Yeah, so that's some interesting acts to when you have Dickie Betts, Don Williams, Michael Johnson. What are some things that you learned from each of them, out on the road? Because Dickie has such an interesting reputation
Well, and well deserved. Dickie at the time, he was living in Nashville. He had just been through Cumberland Heights, so he was on the straight and narrow.
Wow.
The band wasn't, and and I was young and full of it, and first time on a bus, so it was pretty wild ride, and Dickie's behaving all this time.
Wow.
But Dickie was great. He was, depending on his mood, he was either the best that there is. He wrote his own book. There's the Dickie Betts style, that the two humbuckers together through a 50 or 100 watt Marshall through JBLs. Just this beautiful, clean, but yet saturated sound. And or if he was uninspired, he might just take off his guitar in the middle of a song and walk off and leave the band up there and not finish the set. So it was just one or the other.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I learned about how to play harmony with parts, because they had all that Allman Brothers stuff. We'd do Blue Sky and just to get all those cool harmonies, So I learned a lot about that from him. Michael Johnson was actually spent time in Spain training as a classical guitarist. So he played in classical position, full hand. It was like playing with a piano player, because he'd be playing upper lines and lower lines. And I learned a lot about, so what I did with him was play acoustic. I had a Takamine, which was at the time the best electric acoustic you could get. And I learned about, I call it feathering, where you just play this rhythmic wash, because he was playing everything. He could go out and play by himself, solo. He had all the parts there. Jack and I were just kind of rounding out what he did. So I learned how to play parts that did not get in the way of what he was doing, but yet support it. It was just a lot of really kind of light strumming, just a wash.
And with Don, you said you learned how to play, quietly. What else did you learn working with Don?
Oh, man. Just dynamics. Part of the quiet thing was playing with dynamics and listening to the lyrics. At the time I started recording with him too, and so that was pretty heavy going in to record with him, and Garth Fundus producing. And I really learned, I started, because sometimes Kenny Malone would be playing drums, and he would not ask for a chart, but a lyric sheet. Mm-hmm. And I realized that, the lyrics are really, really important. So, especially for a steel guitar player, where there's just an emotional, once in a while to do a little emotional emphasis, or sometimes triggering off a lyric, without being too corny about it. But sometimes just a little harmonic on the right lyric is very important. So people are sometimes surprised when I hear a song once and I start playing off the lyrics, and it's just, I think that a lot of that came from Don, because his songs were all so well written. He had the best songs.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we get up to Great Plains,
right.
Where so now you've been a club musician,
right?
You've moved to Nashville. You've played with major artists,
right,
and now you're part of a signed band,
right.
And during a time when country music was exploding, and the labels were signing a lot. They had big rosters of artists and such. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that was basically, that core band came out of the Michael Johnson band. Michael Young on drums and Jack Sundrud and me. And then we did some experimenting, and all the while Brent Mayer we were experimenting with things. Basically, we did our first album as demo projects, before we had a deal. And then we got Denny Bigsby to play bass, and Jack switched from playing bass to being kind of the front man with the acoustic. And I learned so much about recording with that band, Don Potter was the co-producer, and incredible guitar player, acoustic. He played acoustic guitar with the touch of a great electric player. He played really, I don't want to say soft because he played with authority, but it was, he knew how to play the dynamics of the instrument. He played with pretty light gauge strings, but he had the touch of a great electric player. And I learned a lot about how to record acoustic guitar, how to just do parts on a record. How, once again, like when you're with a trio where you play less, it actually means more. And if you want to make a massive record, you play less, and you play less massively somehow. But you learn to play with what the other players are playing. And if the bass is doing a certain part, don't try to ape what he's doing, but emphasize, or not emphasize, but just play something that adds to what he's doing rather than just trying to copy what he's doing. Listen to all the different instruments. When you're playing with the drums, maybe emphasize a backbeat, become part of the drum set rhythmically. Even on pedal steel, which sounds kind of weird, find little rhythmic things to do that complement what the drums are doing. So I learned to listen to within the band, and instead of just blasting forth a part, going, "Hey, I got a cool part here," is listening more than playing, and then seeing what you come up with.
So I'm assuming that you all got to play on your own record.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because this would not be the norm at this point. Most bands did not, that were signed did not get to play on their own records.
No.
Maybe the Desert Rose Band, a few other groups where it was actually they played on the records.
No. We played on the record, and we had J.T. Cornfloss, my dear friend, came and played on a couple tracks with us because we wanted to do a couple things kind of a little more live, and we needed the extra guitar player.
Yeah.
And it was great to have him on there.
Yeah. So the band had some success, but then it didn't blow up like some of the other bands of that era. So what did you learn from that experience?
Oh, I loved the band. I loved the first record, but by the time we got around to doing the second record, it became, we'd go record stuff, and then there'd be meetings about what we recorded and demographics. Well, I don't know if we need steel on this for this demographic. And I'm just going, this is a big load of crap as far as I'm concerned. I don't care about any of that. I want to play the music. And there was a time when radio started telling the labels what they wanted.
Right.
And, it was out of our hands. It was, I lost my spirit in it, and I quit in the middle of the second record.
Yeah.
So it was just, I loved the whole experience, except when it got very corporate, and I learned I don't need to be that guy.
Yeah.
I want to play, and I didn't really enjoy being in the spotlight that much. I realized I'd rather be behind the scenes, and I thought I need to play on sessions.
Yeah.
So, and at the same time, I got married to Ginger, Billy's daughter, and we started raising a family, and I thought I don't need to be on the road either. So that's when I decided to try to become a session player.
So again, this is mid '90s at this point.
Early '90s, probably
Early
'92.
90s.
Yeah.
Okay. So, that's a perfect time to try to get into session work, just because of the amount of work. So you could do. There was so much demo work because there were so many writers that were signed to publishing deals.
Oh yeah.
And it was just there was so much work. It was kind of ridiculous in a way.
It was literally 3 sessions a day, 5 days a week. It was really one of those times. I look at my calendars from back then, and it's just crazy how much I worked, and how much I learned about song structure.
Right.
Because one of the first things I heard when I came to Nashville is, if you want to play on sessions, get to know songwriters, because you'll play on their demos. Somebody will hear the demo, then they'll go, I want that on my record. So I did that. It took a long time before I ever got on any records, but I literally played 15 sessions a week starting in the early 90s and just steady through. I got to a point where I was frustrated because I saw other people playing on records, but I thought it'll come. That will take care of itself eventually. So I just slugged it out and just learned the recording craft. I didn't want to just become a steel player. I wanted to be able to play guitar too, so I tried to kind of be sort of a utility guy, I guess. For a while there, I was picking up new instruments. I learned to play very limited banjo. I got jaw harps. I, had a bunch of different things. But I also realized that I wasn't going to be able to compete with steel players like Paul Franklin and Sonny Garish and then Weldon Myrick was still playing. Dan Dugmore was in town. I realized I had to change the game, my game for pedal steel, to compete with those guys. So I thought I need to do something, and it sort of came to me. We'll treat it more like we're treating guitars, where you play into a pedal board, and you need to know your traditional steel guitar, but that's when I started using a lot of delays and things like that, effects. And like I say, the electric guitar evolved from Charlie Christian to Yngwie Malmsteen pretty darn quick over a period of 20-some years. It went from just trying to be a louder acoustic instrument where people started distorting it and manipulating it. Well, steel guitar, that didn't happen.
No.
The steel guitar is a very new instrument, really, starting in the early 50s, the pedal steel, but no one was doing much, a gimmick now and then, but it was basically plug in straight into the amp and play clean. And I love that, and I did a lot of that, but I realized there's a whole other sonic world out there. And the steel guitar is such a great tone generator because of the sustain, using the volume pedal, being able to morph from one note to another, so you could do synthesized parts. You could do these big pads, especially when you get into delays, maybe phasing it a little bit. And then I started realizing steel guitar pickups are all very high wound. They're like 15,000 to 18,000 ohms, where guitar pedals are like 5,000 to 7,000 ohms, much lower output. And I was wondering, why does the steel sound so bad trying to distort it? You plug it into an overdrive, a blues driver or something, and it doesn't sound, it's not very friendly sounding. And then I started getting into pickup winding and experimenting with making my own pickups that were lower output.
Right.
And then I realized most steel guitars don't even have a tone and volume control. They just, so I put those in there. And so I've started getting where I was treating the pedal steel almost like an electric guitar sonically. And that just evolved over a few years and got deeper into, I don't know that much about electronics and everything, but at least working on guitar electronics, it's hard to get electrocuted. So I would just get in there and start soldering and winding and unwinding until it sounded better to me.
Yeah.
And experimenting with the signal path and just a different way to approach sonically the pedal steel. So I got into that, all the while trying to. Part of me goes, you need to respect the traditional steel guitar, and so I always try to keep one foot in that traditional world too. So kind of leading a double life. But initially on sessions, I would get my hands slapped a lot. No, you can't have that. That sounds kind of weird. And then eventually it got to be where people started asking for those things. And then, well, give me that wacky thing you do. And, so it just, over a period of years, just sort of developed a slightly different language, kind of my own little side language on the pedal steel. And so now I've got that. It's like being able to speak French and German and then go back to English when I need to. So
you really hit on an important point in that, one, you kind of took steel in a different direction, but to do it, you had to go about fixing the problem, which were the steel guitar pickups that were overwound for most drive pedals and most type of gain effects.
Right.
And so by creating your own pickups, you were able to all of a sudden, have
Right.
marriage with these gain pedals, and you were able to get good sounds out of them instead of them being these horrible, 10K steel guitar pickups or 18, whatever they can be.
Well, most steel pickups are anywhere from 15. I've seen them up to like 22,000 ohms. Just big mid-range machines, just a lot of and they start getting dark on the high end. And to me, any pickup on any guitar is all about the sibilant range, right? Right there, that's where all the magic is in a pickup. Everything else you can deal with. You can adjust and everything. But if you don't have a sweet sibilant sound on a pickup, in my book, it's kind of useless. So I started experimenting. I realized what the problem was. And for a short window there, Jason Lawler made me probably a dozen pickups. I still have a couple of them. P90 steel guitar pickups, Jazzmaster steel guitar pickups.
Wow.
And then the String Master, which is kind of one he already made. That's like the Fender old lap steel pickups, which is basically a Strat pickup, and which is the simplest pickup design there is. And somewhere probably 10, 12 years ago, a friend gave me a pickup winder. That was dangerous. So I started winding pickups in the garage, and I'm still learning. That's a treacherous business, but it's pretty cool.
And you've also, we'll just hit on this now, you've also built some guitars for your friends.
Right, yeah.
So we've had a number of guests on the show that have had, some of the guitars that you've built, and really interesting to see these, because on all of them you've wound your own pickups.
Right.
And
well, my deal is since I was a kid in the playing guitar, in the early 60s, you could go out in 1964, 65 all day long and buy used Fender guitars for $100, $75. All the great ones, we wish we could go back. Right. Somebody said, I wish I had a time machine and a pickup truck so I could go pick up a box full of these guitars. And we used to hot rod them. And that's why the ones that are untouched now are worth so much, because we gutted, I used to borrow pickups from one guitar to put in another, and you couldn't go buy pickups,
Right.
You couldn't even buy gauge strings back then. And but I've always been a guitar hot rodder, and so now I like to, every once in a while I'll get a Musicraft body and a MJT body and a Musicraft neck, and just play with the chemistry of what the neck and the guitar, or the body and the neck, what they're doing with each other. A lot of times I'll put one together and don't even put pickups on it and just play it and see, is this doing something? Maybe if I put this other neck, it'll be a little better. And then just playing around and wind some pickups on it. And I like to just dink around on it for a few days, just adjusting it. And it's like hot rodding a car. You take it to a certain point, tweak it a little too far, and you just back it off a little bit. And then you get the action and you get the pickup height and everything. And there's always sort of a sweet spot you're looking for. So I do that, and I'll build one. Basically, I build them for myself, and then like Guthrie Trapp will get his hands on it, and then I'll never see it again. You know? And that happened with Kenny Greenberg and a few of my friends. So that's been a lot of fun to do that. And couple times a month, I'll start working on a guitar. I do a lot of experimental ones on my own where I try different mahogany necks and just different chemistry. You know.
Your income stream, if we can borrow that phrase, is it mainly from session work? How much is it from live playing?
Right now, I'm not doing. COVID kind of put the
Right.
kibosh on that. And I've back in the early 2000s, I went out on the road with Vince Gill for 3-4 years. That was really one of the only road gigs I had steady, and mostly just playing sessions. With COVID, I started doing a lot more home overdubs, and COVID kind of changed the rules because before COVID, I've always been doing home overdubs, and it was demo work. It was not master records, but now I'm doing records for people all the time. About a year and a half ago, a friend of mine, Leon Michaels up in New York, said, can you play steel on these 3 tracks for me? And he sent them to me, and I've got a little cottage up in southern Kentucky out in the middle of nowhere. I barely got internet, to do files around. And I was up there in the middle of the COVID winter, and I put these tracks in, and I had to email him and go, "Who's that singing?" And it was Norah Jones. So I did 3 songs on this Norah Jones Christmas record that came out last year. And one of my favorite things is on the album credits, everything is, New York and Brooklyn, all these kind of hipster places. And then Russ Pahl did his overdubs from his house in Price's Mill, Kentucky. So I take a lot of pride in that. But been able to do quite a bit of work from home, and things are opening up now. So I just did an album with Dan Auerbach a couple weeks ago on a young artist. And
you have kind of a history with him. Even on a recent Austin City Limits episode, you were seen, playing mostly guitar.
Yeah, I didn't even have a steel guitar out at that time. I was just getting to play second guitar to a guitar guy. It was great.
Yeah. So, how much have you had to hustle for work through the years, and how do you go about doing that?
Well, when I first came to Nashville in '84, I guess, every night at about 9 o'clock, I'd take my steel guitar under one arm, my PV amp under the other arm, and I went out. There was a bunch of little country honky-tonks around Nashville, out around Music Valley and Trinity Lane. And I would just go, I play steel guitar, can I sit in with you? And, sometimes I'd just sit up on the dance floor. I'd play a set, then I'd pack up and go to another club. And I did that for a number of weeks. And eventually I started getting people saying, well, can you sub for me while I'm at the Opry? And can you do, so I ended up kind of starting to get some club work that way. And then that sort of, trickled down to a little bit of road work. I might go out with Cal Smith for a weekend playing Country Bumpkin or things like that, or get on demo sessions. So I've never really, other than that, I've never really gone out and canvassed for work. I've just just been around doing it enough, and I'm not an unfriendly person, so eventually you just kind of start running into work, and always try to do good work, and that reputation will follow you around, and so then you just kind of answer the phone.
Yeah. So you had to do some hustling at first.
I did some hustling
before people started kind of getting to know what you do.
Yeah, there was a year of but those were very fertile times in the mid-'80s. There was a lot going on. There was a lot, like the Nashville network was there, so I would play on TV shows with different people all the time. So I got some exposure that way. Yeah. There was a lot going on.
Yeah.
So.
Let's hit on something that you were talking about, doing these remote sessions where you're recording from home. Well, the part that entails is now all of a sudden you're your own engineer.
Right, right.
Okay. So how much of a learning curve was it to learn how to get a good sound for yourself from home? And what equipment did you have to get?
Well, I learned back in the 70s from a dear friend of mine up in Minneapolis. He had an apartment upstairs from me, and he had a Tascam 4-track, the old reel-to-reel. And he taught me how to, basically, how to get the needle to go up towards the red, but don't go much further. Just basically how to get a signal. And that's very important. And so I've been around recording equipment, and I'll always ask questions. And I know every engineer in town because we're all friends because we work together.
Right.
And when you go into a session, you talk about it. What microphone are you going to put on? What preamp are you going through? You start learning that stuff.
Yeah.
But I started back in the 90s getting a hard disk recorder, and I started doing remote overdubs and had a digital mixer that was, had a 1 year span, was worth $10,000 one year. The next year I couldn't give it away.
Right.
But then I got into Pro Tools pretty early on, and it's pretty intuitive. I don't learn anything more than I need to know. I mean, I've produced some records and I've actually engineered them and everything, but as far as recording myself for people, I just have a little, very simple little interface, a little Apogee stereo interface, and I've been using a Strymon Iridium, their little amp model or whatever it is, so simple. I just use that. I plug my electric instruments into that, and I used to mic up an amp, and I basically keep things simple. I use a SM57 and a API preamp, and really it sounds best if you don't do anything else to it. If you're going to limit it or do anything, do that all later on. But as you're recording, try to record it pretty pure.
Yeah.
And I find that really loud doesn't record really well. If you can have your amp, I used to use a small amp, little Princeton reverb. Most steel players have these big 200-watt amps.
Right.
I've been using the same Princeton for 20 years.
I was kind of blown away. We were it was, working an award show years ago, and I was just, backstage, and and here was Vince Gill's, setup, and I looked around, and I think Al Anderson was playing with y'all at the on this award show. And I was just looking around, and then I saw the steel rig, and you had a reissued deluxe reverb, which was like, that was the opposite of what every other steel player was using. Every other steel player had like, a Session 400 or a Nashville 400, they usually had two, big amp
stereo
or power amps and JBL or Black Widow speakers, and it just blew my mind when I saw your steel. And again, this was early 2000s. But it was...
well, that's what I learned playing with the Don Williams band. I realized that, the front of house engineers always yelling, "You're too loud, I can't get you in the speakers." Well, I took that to heart, and so I play where they can barely hear me. And the best reverb on a pedal steel is when you're playing on stage and it's coming through the house, and that's the best natural reverb. And Vince used to, about all he'd ever have to say about my playing was, "You're the softest steel player I've ever played with."
Right. Yeah.
But
even John Huey and JD, they both play louder.
No, you put the amp up on a little stand right behind you, and you can hear yourself. I don't like hearing it in a monitor. I just want that 12-inch. If you can't hear a 12-inch speaker, you should get your ears checked. And a Fender amp for like a steel guitar for to get into a clean any kind of tone, up around anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 on the volume. That's where that amp wants to be. That's where if you play soft, it'll play clean. If you hit it a little hard, you can get it to grunt a little bit.
Right.
But not really flop out on you.
Yeah.
So it's all about scale. You can do the same thing with twin reverb. It's just going to be louder. Right. I've been. I want to check. I want to get another. I've had several of the Pro Junior Fender. I've been thinking I need to go back to using a Pro Junior. I think that would make a nice little steel amp, because I do like to be able to get a little of the natural overdrive. You know, just that it's a bit of expression. It's, you don't want full on a pedal overdrive. You want something there's that little sweet spot where it's clean and fat, a little crunch, or a little cleaner. You know, there's a sweet spot.
Can you look back on your playing career and say there's a certain record or a song that you played on that helped you really make it as your own person and not having to play like other steel players or other guitar players?
Yeah, well, I think Gretchen Wilson had a song called Redneck Girl, I think it was called. And I had a solo in that. That was probably should have taken another take on it. It was it was live solo, and I did kind of this, I call it Eddie Van Arnold, kind of rocking off, kind of almost sounds like you're doing tapping stuff. And that was a big, huge hit record, and that was a solo on it. So, and it didn't sound like anybody else. And you know, so much what I've done is textures on records, so it's more subtle. There's really not any points where that was the landmark recording. It was kind of an accumulation of sonic tapestry is probably where
But was there a recording that people would use as a touchstone at all? I can say, oh, I'm hiring you because I liked what you did on this album.
Boy, that's a tough one. I really don't know. I can't think of anything in particular. Sorry, bad answer.
Yeah, no. Yeah, because you're still playing, because you've got these lower output pickups. You're going through, and you're not trying to, because so many steel players are so trapped in the Buddy Emmons, Lloyd Green kind of thing, which is great.
Oh yeah.
But those guys have already done it.
Yeah.
And or Paul Franklin. I mean, you know, but Paul's it was and is an innovator. Did all sorts of things with the pedal steel. But interesting to see how you really saw that had been done, and how you really blazed your own trail with the pedal steel.
Well, because I'm listening to stuff like U2 and a lot of that, the dotted eights thing that they did.
Right.
Doing that, I mean, there's a few. I think there's a Toby Keith record where the first part of the record is just me going da 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 da.
Yeah, I've heard you do that on the pedal steel with the dotted eight thing, playing these patterns.
And then I'd do stuff like without telling anybody. I would have the song set to the grid because the song's on a grid, and on the second verse, I might put in a little rhythm pattern, and 9 times out of 10, they'd, after we play the take, they'd talk to the guitar player and go, "Man, that was a great part you played on the second verse," and then they go, "Well, it wasn't me." So I sort of, getting a reputation as the steel player that could actually play with the rhythm section too. Yeah. And sometimes I'll do whole rhythm passes, won't even play anything that remotely sounds like a pedal steel, but it'll be more like a sequenced part.
Yeah. So. Let's talk about Dan Auerbach. How did you get involved with him?
Through Buddy Miller, who I've known Buddy for years and played on a lot of things with him. Well, at the time, Dan Auerbach lived just across the alley from Buddy, and Dan was, this is probably 10, 12 years ago, was looking for a steel player that, colored outside the lines. And Buddy said, "I got your guy." So Buddy called me and says, you don't mind if I give your phone number out? And I said, fine. And Dan called me and said, "Can you come over this afternoon? We're working on something." So I walked in, and there was all these guys in tribal headdresses and everything, Bombino, and this guy from somewhere in Africa, the Jimi Hendrix of South Africa, or not South Africa. I don't even know exactly where it was. But he just threw me in with them, said, "Go in and just play. I want to hear what you do." And so we did a track, and I ended up kind of playing this kind of swimmy solo in the end of the, with the song, and we just kind of went from there. Finished that record, did a couple more days tracking with those guys, and I actually did the only time I've ever done the Hustle was with Dan Auerbach, because I loved his whole thing, and I said, Dan, I'm here as a steel player, and that's great, but I would love to play guitar with you. I love to play guitar. I love to play rhythm guitar. It's probably my deepest passion, is to playing rhythm guitar. And so I'm not going to say anything more, but just put me on that list. So since then, I've kind of I've done more guitar work for him than anything else. And then we might do steel. A lot of times the steel would be an overdub, but got very deep into guitar parts and Dan Electro tic-tac parts and gut string finger-picky rhythm parts. And so I've done probably 20, 30 albums over there.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you, in a classy way, kind of put it out there, because if you hadn't, it never would have happened.
And and I don't like to ring my own bell too often, but I thought this could actually make a difference, and it did. We became friends, and we still work.
Yeah. All right, Russ, we're gonna talk gear now. Now we're reset. We've got your pedal steel. So tell us about what, obviously you've got your own thing going here, and I think Show Pro has helped you out with this, but you've got your own wiring and everything on here. So tell us about this pedal steel.
Well, Jeff Surratt is Show Pro. I've known a long time. This is probably the third or fourth guitar he's built for me, and every time we get a little further out, and I'd have my ideas, and he'd kind of go, "Ugh," and then a day later go, oh, maybe we can do that. Maybe we can do that. Well, this is this is probably 5 or 6 years old. Longer scale length. It's 25 inches. It's about 3/4 of an inch longer than standard. I'm tuned down to E flat instead of E, just because all my favorite guitar players tended to do that, and I decided to try it on the steel. I can use much heavier strings, and it gives it a bigger throat to me. It's a big one-piece slab. It's like 12 or 13 inches of maple, where most single necks are only 7 or 8. So it's kind of like an old Fender in a way. He built it for me with no electronics, and then we designed this neck thing so we could put it's all hollowed out, and you can just change out this like a pick guard, and it's got extra holes, and I've got a Ghetto Stomp. Nick Greer made it. I've got that built in here. I've got a little EP2 little booster in there. This controls one of my delays, just for the dotted thing. And this just is either distortion or that. It's just and it switches the batteries in and out. Neck selector, and then I've got a Leslie speed switch when I use a little Leslie simulator and stuff. And then this is another delay. So I can set that to the song and have infinite sustain with that. So you just hit a note. And you can just have that for expression. It's just an expression.
Yeah. So some of these effects are built into the instrument, and some of these are controlling devices that are on your pedal board.
These two here, I've got chords running out, and they're using the expression control for this, like this M5 and this little Boss delay.
Okay.
So, and you can use them whatever you want,
Right.
But I've had this hooked up to a wah-wah pedal and all kinds of things.
So you have so it's like an expression pedal that's built in, but it's a knob instead, and
when you're playing pedal steel, your feet are already engaged.
Right.
It's hard to do a pedal dance because you're already doing a pedal dance.
Right.
The volume pedal is very expressive. Sometimes it's a bit of a crutch, but usually that right foot is busy. Plus, each leg is controlling 2 knee levers too, and then these 2 pedals. So you're already got quite a dance going on. So I've tried to get things that I can control here, because I can just reach over with my right hand or left hand, depends, and just control some of that stuff remotely instead of having to lean over.
And you've got some batteries underneath the board also to power the effects of
I got a 9-volt tucked up under there, and this little rotor switch here is bypass. This brings in the Nick Greer, and it also switches the battery to that.
Right, so the battery doesn't wear out.
Yeah, the battery lasts a year. It's amazing. You have to change it now and then because it just kind of gets away from you. But.
Yeah. And so you have a couple of knee levers and just 2 pedals.
2 pedals, yeah.
Yeah.
Most guys have the 3rd pedal, which basically, I'm going to speak in terms of an E tuning, just because it's E flats too. Yeah. That raises the 4th string a whole tone, and it's a combined. But I put it on a knee lever, so I can get the same by using a knee lever, and I can get more combinations. Plus, this is a very expressive whole tone, and almost as expressive as the first pedal, which is a whole tone. And which is 99% of what pedal steel expression is that. That's where all the money is, and that's where all the emotion is. And without that, it's not a pedal steel.
Yeah.
So everything else is just rudimentary chord changes and stuff, but that's where all the expression is.
See, this is another unique aspect of you as an artist, even though you're playing on other people's records, is here you have this very personalized instrument that's been made for you and has all these.
Yeah, it's kind of a rat's nest, but I'm lucky. I'm adept enough to keep it running. I got to take some. Every once in a while, you got to get in there and fix up a solder joint. My oldest sister worked her way through college summers working for Minneapolis Honeywell, and she was a solderer. So a certified solderer. So she taught me how to solder. So I'm trained.
So you know how to do a good job.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the wires do, but as long as it's not high voltage, I'll dig in.
Yeah.
So.
Show us your the guitar that you built behind you.
This has kind of become my go-to guitar last year or so. It's just Strat body. I ended up routing it out for some humbuckers.
And did you wind those yourself also?
There's a place up in, it's called Philadelphia Luthier Supply.
Right.
And he has every kind of PAF part, even the wider spacing for the Strat bridge. Right. And believe me, there's a whole trail of dead pickups, leading to these. That was my first venture into humbucker pickups.
Yeah. So, because there's all sorts of, there's so many things you can do with a humbucker where you have the coils offset as far as the number of windings, whether you pot it or not, all this rigmarole. And so what did you find what was the thing that worked for you?
Well, I ended up using enamel wire, 42 gauge wire. I tried poly and then the Formvar.
Right.
And I don't know how much difference, but these ones ended up being the enamel, and that worked good. They're pretty low wound. I don't think, I bet they only read 6.5 or something. I don't think they're real hot. And I purposely mismatched the coils a little bit. Maybe one's like 7,600, the other one's like 74.
Just to let a little more air through.
Yeah, and like I say, I made a bunch of them, and I said earlier, it's all about the sibilant range. It's getting up into the, where the, nice. They're not. There's a nice brightness to them. You can almost get into a Fender.
We're getting a little.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a bad case.
No, that's just my life. But anyhow.
Yeah.
So it's I play a lot of rhythm guitar, and it's a great rhythm guitar.
Right.
I got flat wounds on it, so it's a little clunky, but
Yeah. And do you tend to use flat wounds a lot?
on certain guitars, some
Yeah.
do, some work really well, some
Right.
don't. This has got a plain third,
Yeah.
and it's got a mahogany neck.
Yeah.
I ordered it's a Jazzmaster headstock, but it's mahogany with rosewood, so it kind of to me it's getting closer to that morph between a Fender and a Gibson.
Yeah.
It's
And tell us about the circuitry that we can see
oh,
there.
that's just there's a hole there, and I've never been much for the third pickup, so I just took a little piece of circuit board and put some spare parts in there. So it's
Okay, so that's
conversation
just,
piece.
That's
yeah.
just so that's not connected. to
Yeah, I
anything.
could tell. I should put a little light on it, and then tell them that's the Zoom circuit. But it's really not. But yeah, I play this guitar quite a bit. It's a great guitar. It's a lot of fun, and my wife likes the color. She calls it greeny. I don't name my guitars, but she does. So it's a good one. And this is probably 10 or 12-year-old Gretsch, Japanese Gretsch that I got on a trade. It had a tune-o-matic. It wasn't speaking acoustically. And so I actually drilled into the top of the guitar to put a tune-o-matic on it. And just by chance stuck this Bigsby bridge on, which is non-adjustable.
Right.
But it's actually in the exact right spot. So it's right in tune. So it's a hard aluminum bridge. So.
Yeah.
And these are some homemade Filtertrons. And once again, made a bunch of them and finally kind of got down to where they sounded right. I rewired it so a Gretsch, stock Gretsch is, got about 20 feet of wire before you get to the...
and it's confusing.
Yeah.
The wiring's confusing.
So this is the tone control, this is the volume, and then the three-way, and there's very little wire in the guitar.
Yeah, and I love how you've kind of filled those spots. It looks great.
Dan Auerbach has been a nice influence on me. I've been around so many of my friends, like Bukovac, Tom Bukovac, we're all about these beautiful vintage guitars, but you can't hot rod them.
And one of the factors that people don't think about is a lot of these all original instruments, they weren't really played very much. And sometimes they weren't played very much because they weren't great guitars.
Right.
And then you have these guitars that were great instruments that guys played them a lot, and because of that, they had to replace stuff on it or they hot rodded it.
Yeah.
A lot of times those are the better instruments.
Oh, yeah, the hot rodded guitars.
Yeah.
And Dan has taught me it's okay to put your initials on a guitar and mailbox letters or, so.
And that's a funny thing because I've thought about that a lot recently, looking at old pictures of country performers, and especially like old pictures of guys using Fender instruments.
Yeah.
And you see guys playing Telecasters, and they've got mailbox letters on them. Or even Jimmy Bryant, he had his pick guard with his name and like a cowboy and all this stuff. And it's
so I'm celebrating that for a while there. I was trying to be correct like everybody else, and. I realized, first off, to me, instruments aren't a great investment, so I got out of that. I've got a couple nice old guitars, but most of my guitars now are kind of like this, just character pieces. But it's a great guitar, and I get to use it quite a bit in the studio. So.
Yeah. Let's talk about the amp. So you've got an old drip edge, probably 68, 67 Princeton reverb.
Yeah. And this one has got a bit of a story. I think it was originally owned by Jim Covard, who was a great session player in the late 60s through the 70s.
Yeah. And just because that's not like as common a name as like, maybe Reggie Young or James Burton or something like that, could you give it just like the short version of things that Jimmy played on?
He was the original player in Barefoot Jerry. All the great rock and roll leads possibly were played through this amp. And we were talking earlier, he had an LPB1, and you can see where the Tolexes wore away from where he plugged it right into the amp. He played on the Don Williams records, Crystal Gale records, especially the early 70s, he was right there with everybody else. He was one of the first guys to bring distortion to the Nashville game. He was the first rock and roll guitar player to play on country records.
Yeah.
And he was great. and he had a tragic ending. And but
did he play on 6 Days on the Road earlier?
Yes, as a matter of fact, he did.
Okay, because
That's right.
This is going to be a crazy aside, but yes, yeah, he did have a tragic ending, and Colvard played on 6 Days on the Road
Yes.
for Dave Dudley, which is a really different tune because of the percussiveness of his playing, the twanginess. But then he was a serious jazzer also, and so he played on the kind of Opry Almanac show.
Oh, yeah.
And he was played like a Gibson Birdland. And then through a bunch of research, I know this is a crazy aside.
No, it's a good one.
I was able to find out, this took a lot of detective work, but I was able to find out there is a version of Caravan that was released on a country music, compilation. It's an instrumental version of Caravan, and everyone thought it was Grady Martin playing guitar on it. And I was able to talk to Steve Gibson, who at the time was the music director on the Opry.
Right.
He was able to talk to some of the guys that actually played on that session, and all of them agreed that the playing style and the guys that were there, they remembered Jimmy Colvard playing that. And so it was really great to be able to identify that was something that he played on. That was a really great recording of it. Because it's just, if anyone wants to find the recording, it's Ferlin Husky Caravan, which Ferlin Husky was a singer, but that's the only thing that it was Ferlin Husky. They had time left over and they just cut this version of Caravan, but it's amazing, and Jimmy's playing was fantastic. So that enough of the aside on Colvard.
Well, 6 Days on the Road is worth a real close listen because it's got some amazing guitar playing.
Yes.
Well, then I think Steve Hinson had it for a while.
Yeah, great steel player.
And then he sold it to me. I played it for a number of years. Then I sold it to Bukovac. And of course, it ended up coming back to me from Bukovac.
Yeah, he sells everything.
Yeah, so between Hinson, Colvard, Bukovac, and me, this has been on thousands of records. It's a great little amp, you know.
It's got just the right amount of wear to it. It's like, this is a serious amp.
This has been around. It's got stories to tell, and it's got a really nice full-throated sound.
And I saw in the back that it's got a 10-inch Celestian Gold speaker in there.
I've had different ones. I like the Eminence makes some good speakers. But this one was what Bukovac had in it, and I haven't touched it. And it's a great amp.
Yeah.
Great amp.
Let's talk about your pedal board. So,
okay.
I'll just say right now, we're glad that you're using a Truetone power supply. So
I'm glad that worked out.
Yes. So you've got a CS12 underneath there, and then tell us what all you've got over there.
Well, basically, I start out by going into the Boss GE7, which is an analog one. They kind of clean it up, take some of the noise out of it. Go into a little RC booster, which I'm kind of not using so much these days. Maybe going to clear out some real estate. I've got a C9 organ thing here. Once in a while, sometimes I'll blend that in with things, and you. Hard to guess that's a steel guitar.
And there, finally, I was listening to some old Haggard records, and there was a period of time where the pedal steel was run through a Leslie on a couple Haggard tracks, and it's just it kind of blew my mind for a minute because it was like 1968 or 69, and all of a sudden it was like, why the steel's going through a Leslie?
Oh, Leslie's great. I used to, when I played in rock bands up in Minneapolis, I carried around a Leslie 147 for several years, and had a lever here to do the speed switching. And we played Tower of Power songs. I played all the horn parts and the organ parts on the steel.
On the steel. So after the C9?
And then I go to this Mobius.
Yeah.
The Strymon stuff is all good. I've had really good luck with it. I use the phaser a lot. I like it because you can increase the intensity and stuff, and it's a great sound. If somebody mentions Sneaky Pete, just put a little of that on there, and they're in. So, and I use it there's a lo-fi setting, and there's good tremolos. It's just a good It's a very good Swiss Army knife. And then I go down, I got a Pog, which a lot of times I just put a little of the octave up on it. It's almost like having a bright switch. You don't really hear it, but you feel a little sing in the...
It'll help it kind of cut through a little better.
Yeah. And then from there, I go to the volume pedal. So I'm not even seeing a volume pedal till after I have what I call my tone shaping pedals. And that's distortions, EQ, any kind of modulation, anything like that. That all comes before the volume pedal.
And so let me just pause here to spotlight the fact that this is not the norm for steel players.
Right.
Most steel players would go straight from the steel into the volume pedal, and then they would have any type of effects after that. And of course, most of them don't use any type of gain effects.
Right.
But that's immediately, that way you're able to have your drive level, and then you're just able to use your volume pedal as a master volume.
Right. Because if you put the volume pedal before anything like that, you're constantly changing the input to it. So, this way, when I have a distortion, it's all the same at every volume. So, then I go into my time things, delays and reverbs and stuff, and I've had any number of digital delays. I'm using the Boss now as a DD200. I've had the bigger version of it. I like it because it has a readout. So if somebody says this track is, everything's on the grid these days.
Right.
So, 85, I can dial it in for a dotted sound. And also it's got an expression control. So I can control. So right here, I can, on the fly, I can adjust what I want. And then I go from that into M5, line 6, which I've had dozens of them over the years. They usually last me about 18 months, and then something gets funky. I just go buy another one. They're like $150. It's an amazing toolbox
because
Swiss
it
Army
has
knife.
so many different sounds.
And so much of it is good. But mostly it's my runaway delay, and I have it set on a low fidelity delay, and the control is controlling the gain of the volume of the repeats and the runaway of it. So.
Yeah.
So you can get a steel guitar, which is hard to have controlled feedback. I can get it to feed back in a very controlled manner, generally in tune.
Would you play a little bit of your kind of dotted eighth kind of rhythmic thing, just so people can hear what that sounds like on the steel? Because people are used to hearing that on guitar.
Yeah.
But let's give us a second of that, just so we can hear that.
Let's see. Let's see if that 84. Let's see here. It's going to take a second. Let's go to about right around 100 beats, and I'll set this. Set them both to 100. So this first one is just doing a dot. And then the second one is doing a. So you go from one, I call it a photographic delay.
Right.
And generally you try to make it so it's the equal of the volume of the original note. And then this other one, that's doing straight eighths. So let's see. Get rid of some of this verb. Let's see if I can kind of do that Eddie Van Halen thing.
Yeah.
So it's just a bunch of things with the volume pedal. You can, if you hit it with every quarter note, you can. use it a lot. I probably abuse that, but in the second verse of a song, you'll be going along and I'll be filling the choruses with, just kind of... But we'll get to a second verse, and normally I'd be just sitting there wishing I was smoking cigarettes or something. I might just go... And it generally people like that. So, it's just...
And the guitar player gets credit.
Yeah, the guitar player gets
Until
credit.
he admits that he didn't play. I know I didn't play that.
Yeah, that's happened a number of times. So, it's the oldest trick in the book. I think maybe it goes back to Grady Martin. Was it Bird of Paradise?
Fly Up Your
Nose.
Yes.
Yeah. Albert Lee did a lot with it. Buddy Emmons did a track on it. And then Edge kind of took it to a whole new level. Yeah. And Pink Floyd. So it's an old gag, but it's a really usable thing.
It is. It's a great gag.
So.
And I guess at the end of the line, you've got that iridium for when you go direct.
Yeah, and also I got this thing. This Kenny Greenberg turned me on to this. It's called a super moon, and it's a. It's just a nice smoky,
verby kind of.
Yeah, and I was using it a couple years ago, and working on something for T-Bone Burnett. He said, "What's that sound?" And I said, "Well, it's this supermoon." And he got online and bought one. And next time I talked to him, he said, "I'm doing the soundtrack for True Detective, and I'm running everything through the supermoon." So I thought, well, that's good.
Yeah.
But it's a real nice, there's lots of reverbs. We can get all caught up in all the different. I like a plate. That's what they used to use on steel guitars in the studio. The spring reverb, there's nothing better than a Fender spring reverb.
Yeah.
But then there's kind of the sort of effects reverbs. And this covers a lot of ground for that. Yeah. And then into the iridium. And the iridium, all the time when I'm recording at home, that's what I use. I just go right into my computer. And
have you done any, because you can like download different IRs or anything. Have you done anything to the unit?
No, it's just as I bought it probably 3 years ago. I haven't touched it.
Great.
But it's almost like it's not there. It's so transparent.
And which of the modes do you like?
I usually start on the Fender because that's where but I use the Vox a lot.
Yeah.
And just because it is a nice little chiminess. And then if I'm doing something really overdriven, I'll use the Marshall a bit because that's a little darker. And, so.
But right now you're
I'm just going straight in. I'm bypassing it. So.
Yeah, T-Bone Burnett. How did you end up working with him?
Buddy Miller was two guys. Dennis Crouch, the bass player, and Buddy Miller. Back when they were working on. After the Raising Sand record, the Alison Krauss, Robert Plant record, they were doing a second album. And Dennis and Buddy were both going, T-Bone's really fishing for a steel player here in Nashville. He just doesn't want the usual or whatever that means.
Right.
And we've been, giving him your name. And finally one night about 10 o'clock, I was just relaxing and the phone rings and it was Buddy Miller. He said, "Get over to Sound Emporium right now. Bring your steel guitar." So I go over and I'm a little nervous. I walk in and here's the tracking room full of, Mark Ribot and Jay Bella Rose, this whole bunch of people, and Robert Plant and Alison Krauss. They're in the middle of working on a Merle Haggard song. And basically, they stopped for me to come in and set up.
Ooh, that's a lot of pressure.
And get my sound, and they're kind of waiting. They were all in place. And finally, this big, tall, blonde guy, T-Bone, comes over and introduces himself. Said, "I've heard good things about you." Then he leans over and says, "I don't like steel guitar licks." And that's the last discussion we've ever had about steel guitar. And luckily, I think I read into that and knew what he meant. He doesn't try to fit a bunch of licks. He wants to play the song,
Yeah.
And actually, that album just came out like this last year. That track is on there, and it's a Merle Haggard song. And I think about how scared I was while I was playing it, because that was the take. It was probably 1 or 2 takes. That was it, not repaired or anything. And I guess it sounds okay, but boy, I know what I was going through at the time.
Yeah.
You know, and since then I've befriended all those people, and I'm much more relaxed, and it's a whole new world. But well, when you walk into a world like that, that was totally unlike Nashville. You know?
Yeah. So what's coming up next for you? Are you continuing to do sessions? Any live work?
Not doing any live work at the moment. I'm just doing sessions, doing overdubs from the house. Since the post-COVID thing, work is really spotty. Sometimes I'll have a week where there's really nothing, and then I'll have a week where I'm just buried in overdubs, or then I'll end up going to Dan Auerbach's and tracking for 4 days on a record. It's all of the above.
Yeah.
And I've sort of semi-retired from a lot of the demo work I had been doing, but I'm thinking of dipping my toes back into it because I miss my friends more than anything. There's just a bunch of players, especially the younger guys, that I feel I'd like to be hanging around again. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. You've also kind of, besides the album that you've also sporadically kind of released, songs on
Right.
your YouTube channel. So people should check out.
Yeah. What happened was Paul Franklin called me up last year, said, "Do you want to come and play at my steel guitar camp?" I said yes before thinking about it, and then realized I do not play in front of steel players. I don't know steel guitar rag. I never played a scripted note in my life. So I had 4 months to work on it, and I came up with 20 minutes worth of music that was completely scripted. And I made tracks and everything, and I went and played in front of 200 steel players, some of them world-class steel players. And it was, I guess it just shows that you can do something new in your life. I'd never done that. That was out of my comfort zone. I woke up in cold sweats, dreaming that I had froze up in front of all these people. But I actually got on Itzhak Perlman's site, and he talked about how to practice, how to not over practice, just all this stuff. And I went into training for 4 months, and I pulled it off. I don't think I embarrassed myself. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So, but since then I've been recording instrumentals. I realize I can do that. Yeah. So every once in a while I pop one up on YouTube.
Yeah. One of the interesting things you've done is I don't know if you're using a vocoder or what you're doing, but you will have these tunes where you have a microphone and you're also controlling with the steel. You've done like in the Beach Boys, In My Room, and Skeeter Davis, Into the World. Those are some really interesting tracks also.
Well, that's another sort of homemade pickup. This is I took 2 Roland G500s. I don't remember what it is. It's a guitar synthesizer, with the hex pickup.
Yes.
And I took 2 hex pickups, took them all apart because they're arched.
Right.
And they're all just individual little humbucking pickups. Each one of these is actually 2 coils. They actually cancels the 60 cycle hum. And I epoxied them into a little piece of aluminum channel, ran the wires out, have a 13-pin connector underneath here, and then Barry over at XTC, is it XTS? Took and ganged 2 of the synthesizer units together, so I can use all 10 strings. And then I go through that using just a sawtooth signal into a little Electro-Harmonix vocoder. And so you can vocode it.
Yeah.
So, and it gets that, sounds like a talk box, but it's actually the vocoding. You can get more particular. And I also do Hammond organ stuff. I've got some Hammond organ patches and a Leslie pedal and so just trying, basically I come up with a concept, try to think it through, then I try to actualize it. And what's great in this day and age is then you just make a little video of it, and then you can put it up on YouTube and sort of forget about it. But there's proof I did that.
Right. Just the fact that you can create that and put it out there, and it's not just something that, because so many times in the past, people would do these experiments, they would record it, and then it would, because of the expense of pressing things and distribution, now
it's there. And, I've never been into that for making money. I was never into playing guitar for money. I just loved it, but I was lucky to make a living. But, so I do these things because it ain't about money. To me, it's about an artistic expression. Years ago, Glenn Worf, the bass player, cornered me at a Christmas party and said, "There's something, will you take my advice?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "You're an artist. You're not just a hack session player. You're an artist. You need to start behaving more like an artist." And that really meant a lot to me.
And what do you think he meant by that? By
I
behaving
think
like an artist?
Just go ahead and let your freak flag fly, and don't just worry about serving others in their commercial purposes. That's good. That pays the rent.
Right.
But then that allows you to express yourself.
Yeah.
And so I do now. To me, this is an art. It's like making a painting or a sketch. Every idea. To me, they come to me in ideas, a little concept. And then, like we say, we can do the proof of concept and put it up where anybody can see it.
Right.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah. Well, Russ, thank you so much for coming down. It was an honor to get to hear you play and tell your story, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.